folks. It's time for episode 15 of the Successors podcast. I am your host, Kara Oosterhuis. And can I just say it is ridiculous we are halfway through the year already? Crazy, crazy. You know, my poplars in the yard are starting to release all their pollen. So in some ways, kind of looks like we're getting a June snow here in southern Alberta. But hey, much better than the regular snow in June. Speaking of June and southern Alberta, it's been hot, and we are officially in storm season. I am currently watching a big old cloud roll its way in. Here's to hoping it doesn't flatten the crops and my yard like it did last year. Anyways, without further ado, I'm excited to introduce our next guest, Lara de Moissac, originally of Bigger, Saskatchewan, and now Calgary, Alberta. Lara, how's it going today?
It's really good. It's nice to hear from you, Kara.
Yes, and same definitely goes for you. Okay, so tell our audience here, who are you? Tell me a bit about yourself.
I grew up on a farm in west central Saskatchewan, just west of Bigger. And I kind of knew I was always going to be involved with plants from an early age. You know, you grew up on a farm and you're expected to go weed the trees. Because we had a lot of trees to weed and water. You know, go weed the garden, go be outside, go do stuff that's helpful in the yard, and, you know, pick beans and raspberries and all that kind of stuff. So I knew from an early age that I liked plants, maybe even liking plants more than people. But my career trajectory in agriculture is a little bit unconventional. I started out in horticulture. I knew I wanted to go to the horticulture program at Olds College, probably since grade 9, which is unusual for anyone that age to know what they want to do. I wanted to venture out and be independent, and I moved to a different province. I went to Olds College. I had a great time. I learned a lot. I was very studious. I was not at the bar, you know, like everyone else usually is. And I studied those plants and that plant identification stuff really hard, and I was immersed. So the initial intent going there was to become a landscape designer. And, you know, when you're starting out in industry and you don't necessarily get the right job right away, instead of landscape design, I ended up in landscape maintenance, which is totally fine. It's just a little bit harder on the body. So, you know, after a couple of years of gardening professionally, I thought, okay, it's all fine and dandy to take care of plants and make things look pretty, but there's no end production. There's no end use other than public enjoyment. So yeah, after Olds College and working in that industry, I decided I should go back to school, and agriculture at the University of Lethbridge was a really logical choice. It was a nice small university with good class sizes. Everybody knew your name, and the location was good. It was in a really interesting area down there, and it was a 2-for-2 transfer from my Olds College diploma. So that's from, you know, being interested in horticulture all the way to getting into agriculture.
Why horticulture? Do you think that comes from growing up gardening a bunch, or what really made you go that direction originally?
Yeah, I think it comes from being outside all the time. And, you know, initially when you're a kid, you hate having to go to the garden. I hated it.
Oh, absolutely.
And somewhere around like age 14 or 15, I think actually I can pinpoint it. I went to the library and realized how many landscape design books there were. And that flipped a switch in me. I went from hating having to weed the garden to finding it kind of therapeutic. And I still find a lot of value in gardening and horticulture now that I don't have it as my, you know, primary responsibility or primary job posting, right? Like it's an enjoyment thing for me now. So yeah, that's a good use.
Yeah, sometimes things we enjoy yes, we could follow what we love and turn it into a job, but sometimes things are better kept as our hobbies too.
Yeah, and I didn't want to resent gardening. Later in my life, I wanted to still really like it and not hate having, you know, to go to work every day. That's nobody's end goal in their career, is like you wanna really like going to work every day. So
you mentioned you grew up on a farm. What kind of farm did you grow up on?
Primarily a grain farm. We had some cattle, and we had a deal worked out with a neighbor that they took care of the calving, and we just pastured them in the summer. And I remember those cattle got sold 1999, I think it was. So after that, the primary focus was grain. And ever since then, it's been grain. It was a good place to grow up. I learned a lot of skills of, trucking and building grain bin pads and grain bins themselves. And, I'm pleased to see where that farm is at now. I think it's in really good hands. It's got a very good direction and trajectory for it. My brother is taking it over, and I'm really proud of how far he's come with it, and even the last 10 years, and where it's going. It's in good hands. I'm not worried about it at all.
That's awesome. I know you can't see me, but I'm sitting over here smiling. It's always nice to hear when siblings speak positively of each other, and that there's good hopes for the farm.
Yeah, and I part of before we started this interview, you gave me a list of questions. One of them was, why did I choose a career off farm? And part of why I didn't want to go back to the farm is I know there's a lot of risk involved, and my brother is very well set up to handle that type of business risk. He was a businessman and a general contractor in Calgary for 15 years before he decided he'd take over the farm. So it's something I personally don't think I would be able to handle very well. And that's why it's hard. I know it's still a lot of risk for him to take on, even though he's used to that kind of risk. But I know that personally, I wouldn't have been able to handle it. It's not for everybody. It takes a special type of person to take on that kind of business management and that kind of risk.
Well, and we're all so different and have such different skill sets that I think it's amazing sometimes when you think about it. What, I might hate something and you might love that exact thing that I despise. We're just all wired so different.
Yeah, everyone's it's all relative. Everyone is able to handle different things in different ways. We're all weathering a storm, but we're in different kinds of boats, capable of handling that storm differently. Kudos to anyone who decides to go back to the farm and take it over, and hopefully you have a good succession plan in place.
Do you still go back and help on the farm at all?
I wish that I could. In my current position, I don't have a lot of time to go back to the farm, and I wouldn't rule it out. I wouldn't rule it out completely. Having some sort of partnership or, even kind of an investment opportunity is something we would definitely have on paper and cross those T's and dot those I's to make sure those expectations are firmly in place in paperwork. And I think that would go with any kind of, whether it's, I go back and invest in a piece of land and start grain farming or vice versa, right? Any type of deal that would get worked out, I would just make sure it's firm on paperwork. But yeah, I wouldn't rule out going back and helping. I think that would be so much fun and so great, especially with the team that my brother has in place right now. They're a well-oiled machine. So usually when I go home, I'm not really needed. I am flattered when every once in a while I get a phone call and he says, what do you think of this? I need a second or even a third opinion. So I help when I can.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you help in more ways than you even realize just by being there to pick up that phone call.
Yeah, it can go a long way.
So talk about, you said you went to University of Lethbridge, but that wasn't the end of your schooling. What did you do next?
Well, after U of L, I actually found myself in Lower Mainland BC working for a hops operation.
Wow.
We had 3 or 4, one main flagship farm where all the main processes took place, like the drying and the picking, because it's a stationary combine. Picking all the way through to baling. That was an interesting job to find myself in. I did everything from field installation to sample preparation technician work. So not every day someone finds themselves in production, but it was what was available at the time, and definitely gave me a unique experience there. But kind of my time at University of Lethbridge kind of made me think I really liked the ag soils management class I took, and kind of the more you know, the less confident you might be, or the more you know, the more you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You're more aware of what you're not knowledgeable on. And I thought, oh, I'm really curious about soil. Like I want to go learn more about soil. And my love of soils is kind of a long story. Like I think I can trace it all the way back to grade 7. We had a science unit that was specifically on soil, and the names of the soil bacteria really caught my attention. And mostly I was just proud that I could pronounce those names. But it was neat at that age that there were microscopic beings in soil that functioned. They performed functions. And that love of soil even progressed when my dad we're sitting down at the kitchen table eating lunch, and dad would start telling us about rhizobia species. And in grade 11, I think, or 12, I did a biology project on Rhizobium leguminosarum and peas. And then at U of L, it kind of progressed with that egg soil management class, and I was just always curious. And I knew that doing a master's would give me a pretty specific skill set, both in the lab, in the field, with writing, reading, and critical thinking. And I thought, I think I should go back and do my master's in soil science. I still remember taking a phone call from, she didn't end up turning out to be my professor or my supervisor, but I remember taking a phone call in the field, and she said, I'm so sorry, I can't take you on as a student because you don't have the lab background. And I thought, oh shucks. I maintained professionalism in that conversation because I knew another opportunity was going to come up. And I had reached out to a few professors at University of Saskatchewan, and one of them pulled through for me. She had a project with peas and lentils in crop rotations across Saskatchewan. I thought, that's my jam. That is my project right there. And it turned out to be a perfect fit. She was a supervisor that valued my work experience, and she didn't need to micromanage me. She didn't need to keep tabs on me. I managed my project. Of course, I needed help along the way, like every grad student does, but I don't think I could have been paired with a more perfect project for my interest.
I think asking for help is very underrated. We always talk about it, but that doesn't make you a lesser student or a lesser employee or lesser anything by asking for help. I actually think sometimes it makes you a better student or employee.
Definitely. And I think I kind of give myself this 20-minute rule. I give myself 20 minutes, depending on what it is, 20 minutes to 2 hours for the task. And if I can't get it done in that amount of time, I'm going to go find somebody who can either explain it to me in such a way that I understand it a little bit better, go read something, or find someone that can suggest something for me to read that would make it more clear, or go ask a person that has done it before. I think that kind of rule can ring true for any stage you're at in your career. I say 2 hours because when I was during grad school, you had a little bit more time to try and suss out those problems for yourself, but I never gave it more than 2 hours. And now it's about 20 minutes. So you get a little more expedient within industry.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you want to talk a bit about, I guess, the process of, you made that jump, you're working in hops, and you were maybe thinking, okay, this isn't necessarily for me, but you realized you wanted to chase that dream of learning more about soils, that sort of thing. Talk about that jump and maybe some of the, did you have any struggles when it came to making that decision, or you knew that's what you needed to do?
I can kind of pinpoint that switch from, I think the struggle was more making that agriculture to agriculture. I took a while. I was actually on vacation, and I remember thinking, what's going to make the most logical sense for me to change my career to still be happy with what I'm doing, but provide more, or be able to provide more value. And it was, all the skills from horticulture still apply to agriculture. I still use lots of the skills that I learned during my diploma and my applied science degree at Old College in my agriculture, section of my resume, right? For going back and doing a master's, the inspiration actually kind of came from now my husband. Jose was doing a master's in animal science at University of Alberta, and I was watching him go through this program, and it was partly about the skill set that I would gain, and partly about the types of jobs that I'd be able to get afterwards. And not necessarily about money, but the type of mental challenge that I would get. Not necessarily about money, but the type of mental challenge that I would get from having a master's and being able to get kind of not the highest jobs possible, but like what kind of skills would I be able to use every day after the master's. And that I think that being well-rounded is really important, but also like don't be afraid to go after the more unconventional path or the more unconventional jobs.
Yeah, and that can be like it can be scary at times to kind of go the unconventional way. I'm not saying, do not get me wrong, it is not the easy route to stay at home and be on the farm. It's got it, like you and I discussed, it's got its own set of struggles, but it does take a lot to kind of go off that beaten path.
It takes gumption to decide, I have this skill. I'm not very good with this skill, but I'm going to go after a job that's going to make me better at this particular skill. That's kind of what happened after grad school for me. I worked really, really hard at becoming a better writer and a better communicator through writing. And I didn't want to lose that skill. And that's actually what brought me to applying to a job at RealAgriculture and becoming a staff writer for almost 2 years. I didn't want to lose that skill. I wanted to keep writing. And it was just happenstance that I saw the job posting for it and the timing was right. I was just finishing up my thesis and I had just defended it and I thought, oh, I want to keep writing. And here comes this opportunity to write about agriculture, and not just agronomy or soil science, but like everything and anything in agriculture.
Do you want to talk about what you learned about not just, yourself in writing, but about science communication in general?
I learned consistency and attention to detail in that job. Grammar and punctuation and how like tone, how things come across, what message you're trying to convey, how to write a piece so that people are reading between the lines but still be unbiased. Now when I go to read a piece, an article, a journal, any type of news or media, like you read it differently now that you've been on the other end writing it. So but the small details really add up, and they form or they shape the big ideas. And you have to give off. It's very hard to give off the right impression sometimes, but it's all in those details.
So from Real Ag, you then moved on to working with what your goal was, and you're now working with soils. Tell me about your job now.
Yeah, I worked at a company called Croptonistic Technology, otherwise known as SWAT Maps, so soil, water, and topography maps. And it is what it says. It's soil, water, and topography mapping. And we turn that into a different kind of management solution. It's not necessarily just variable rates that we're, creating prescriptions for and applying. It's a whole different like management system, I guess we could call it. We're taking stable soil properties and integrating those into maps that get ground truthed. So that ground truthing piece is actually really, really important, and it's a lot of pressure to get that part right. But I mean, you can always re-ground truth something and go get, a map that's, 95% instead of 85% there. But it's really interesting to be able to take that soil background and go out to a field and say, oh, I'm seeing this in this area because of this, and this, and understand what's going on based on everything I've learned up to now. Once you have all that information and soil test results come back, you can create, you're influencing what that farmer is putting on for fertilizer, or soil amendments, or, we've done liming prescriptions before, or you can do a manure, you can do compost. Like it's a very interesting tool.
So, it's a conversation I have time and time again, and I know we're getting a little off topic here, but soil testing, it is something that like I talk agronomy all the time, and I talk to lots of different farmers, and we can have all the data in front of us, but at the end of the day, we have to convince lots of these farmers to make the time to soil test. So, like, what's your number one selling point when it comes to saying, okay, you say, for example, you're talking to your brother and you're saying, hey, we need to do soil tests on the farm, and this is why.
You can't manage what you're not measuring. And when in doubt, test it out. I think those are two phrases that immediately come to mind with soil testing in terms of, trying to convince farmers in general. Sometimes really good proof is in the return on investment. And a lot of them, I think, are doing a very good job of understanding that, fertilizer prices are through the roof. You're not going to put on more than you need to. So why not have a baseline understanding of what's already there?
So you're someone that has seen, obviously, all different seasons, and I mean, you've lived in a few different places. Tell me what your ultimate favorite type of agricultural season is. Are you all about pre-seeding? Are you all about harvests? Are you all about fall work? What gets you ticking?
The time between seeding and watching the crops come up might be the most exciting.
Everything goes from brown to green.
Mostly because, it's that, that turnover. New leaf green is everywhere. I'm not sure if I really have a favorite. Fall can be just gorgeous. And, the dust flying and the combines everywhere. It's pretty great. I find winter to be really relaxing. Like, I don't really have a favorite, I don't think. But I definitely do enjoy watching things come out of the ground. I think both in, my personal garden and in the fields. It can be a very revealing time. Somebody maybe kind of rushed some things and put some seed in the ground too fast, and it's, it's not emerging very nicely. Like it could be, you can go sleuthing in fields and find very interesting things happening.
I think every season, like you said, you really captured that well. I think every season has its positive. I wouldn't want it to be seeding forever, and I wouldn't want it to be harvest forever, and I wouldn't want it, I would not want it to be winter forever. But they all bring positives.
Yeah, every season has its perks.
I've got to ask, as somebody who has gone in a few different directions, any advice for the next generation?
Don't rule any opportunity out. Don't say, "Oh, that's not for me. I'm not gonna have that conversation." Have the conversation. Make sure it isn't for you. It might not be, but it might be for you. And you don't really know where certain conversations will lead you. And yes, agriculture is a small, everybody knows everybody. I don't really mean it from that angle as in like, oh, you're going to, don't burn any bridges. Of course, don't burn any bridges, but also don't say no to that recruiter. Have the conversation anyways and see what they have to say. Get a bead on what's happening out there, not just in terms of the job market, but just get a bead on, try and get an understanding of every kind of facet of this industry, because where the crossover is going to happen, where one industry or one part of the sector of the industry is going to cross over and influence another sector, which it happens all the time. It's good to be aware of it, but it's also good to, just have the conversations with when they come up.
Before we wrap up here, I want to ask though, Lara, professional, personal, long-term goals. Well, I know you're a goal setter, so what's kind of down the line for you?
I think my ultimate goal is still to help as many farmers as possible. When I chose to go back to school for agriculture, one of my main goals was to be able to have a position where I could help lots of farmers, not just the family farms. So I think that's still a really good goal. Maybe perhaps on a regional scale, helping farmers of southern Alberta, which my territory is autonomous. I cover southern Alberta right now, so it's given me a lot of that good baseline knowledge to know what kinds of crops and soils are out there. I did talk about public speaking a bit, but definitely that's part of my plan, to become better at explaining those complex topics in simple ways and be like those amazing extension aid professionals. So more practice with that. kind of on a more personal level, it's always been a goal of mine to become bilingual in Spanish. I've been working so hard at it. Well, not even that hard. During grad school, I couldn't devote a lot of brain power to becoming bilingual, but I'd love to be proficient in Spanish. To like be able to have like a working level, like a work conversational level proficiency in Spanish. It would help in my personal life as well, talking to my in-laws. So that's definitely part of the plan. I think become more involved in some of the volunteer roles that are out there. Either with Alberta Institute of Agrologists or Prairie Certified Crop Advisor Board, or the Canadian Society for Soil Science, just to get a little bit different experience that I don't have a lot of. I have volunteer experience, but just to become exposed to kind of those advanced board level roles.
Absolutely. I think those are terrific goals. But anyways, Lara, that's it. That's all. We are out of time. Hey, thanks for joining me today.
Having me on, Kara. I really enjoy talking to you all the time. And I know you're doing really, really cool things with this podcast and featuring really exceptional people. And I'm honored to be included on your list.
And thanks, of course, to all of you who tuned into episode 15 of the Successors podcast. I always say you can reach out to me if you have any questions or suggestions on guests, but the same goes for topics. Anything specific you'd like to learn on the Successors? Send me an email, KOOSTERHUIS@realagriculture.com. Until next time, stay real, and thanks for listening to the Successors.